Netflix's flagship show predictably falling on its face in its final season, and a new Game of Thrones spin-off have recently reminded me of how Game of Thrones ended, as seems to happen every now and then for quite a lot of people, and may continue to happen until its legendarily catastrophic disappointment is surpassed. We could be waiting a while for anything to replace it as the go-to comparison for disappointing endings to long-running shows, because Game of Thrones occupied a uniquely iconic and expansive segment of pop culture for almost a decade, alongside the MCU, and even though it was already getting worse from its midpoint and onward, that final season was still so bad that it permanently scarred the media expectations of anyone who experienced it. If you hadn't learnt already, the fiery crater left by this crash landing was sure to teach you that no franchise, no matter how beloved or meticulously constructed by previous installments, and no matter how much time and money was fueling its production, was safe. That the Stranger Things showrunners, Ross Duffer and Matt Duffer, could be referred to with the same nickname of the two bozos who ran Game of Thrones into the ground, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, or D&D, I have nothing substantive to say about other than to observe it as one of those coincidences that makes me feel like I'm living in a simulation. Game of Thrones was at the peak of its popularity going into this final season, and it kind of felt like people weren't ready for it to be over, unlike many other successful franchises that overstay their welcome to the point that some fans start to feel like it should be put out of its misery. But maybe ending prematurely, with its infamous final 2 seasons making up only 13 episodes, saved the fanbase from watching Thrones suffer a far more drawn-out descent at the hands of these showrunners, an inevitability of their passion and creativity running out of steam after already adapting the spectacle they joined the project for, the Red Wedding, and no longer having the books to fall back on for guidance. This had been indicating for a while that they really should have passed the project along to someone else who would try to meet the standards set by those first 4 seasons. The reaction to the climax of them squandering the biggest show ever over the course of those last 4 seasons was a phenomenon in and of itself. Season 7 was crap, but I was still invested enough to go into Season 8 with the intention of waking up to watch episodes early in the morning after they'd released, so I didn't get spoiled during the day. That was the first time I'd done that for anything, and I haven't done it since, but it only lasted until one specific episode, Episode 3, The Long Night. This is when I perceived there to have been the biggest drop-off in hope, replaced with an impatient dread that the leaks many fans were in denial of before would all come true, confirming the show had fully become the worst version of the typical blockbuster crowd-pleasing that George Martin originally wrote the books as the antithesis of. The previous 2 episodes that start the season, Winterfell and A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the latter indeed sharing that title with the new spin-off series, were already disappointing in how uneventful they were for a season that everyone had waited 2 years for and were painfully aware to only run for 6 episodes.
You never used to shut up, now you're just sitting there like a mute.
Guess I've changed.
However, they did not ruin anything to nearly the extent Episode 3 would. They are littered with largely empty fan service interactions between major characters converging in one place. 2 Calm Before the Storm episodes, where the storm is both this big battle that could very well kill them all and the complete downfall of the show. Such time-wasting fan service includes Jon and Dany going on a dragon-riding date, which isn't convincing anyone that they have much chemistry, Jon learning of his true heritage as a Targaryen and the heir to the Iron Throne, which the audience already knew about from like season 6 or something, and had been theorized for well over a decade by book readers, so that wasn't a surprise. Jaime and Bran anticlimactically revisiting the first shocking cliffhanger that kickstarted the series, Arya and Gendry having some end-of-the-world funny business that doesn't go anywhere because they each survive the series and go their separate ways, and by far the best scene of both this season and season 7, Brienne's knighting. It's all very sentimental and not particularly interesting, but these 2 episodes would still go on to be the best material this final season had to offer. If you came into this spoilery video without knowing, the battle they have all gathered at Winterfell to wait for is one against the Night King and his undead army, or more broadly, against the end of the world itself. Throughout Thrones, the story had been about the politics and war that different human factions fought over the throne, except for the occasional moment Jon Snow, one of his allies, or Bran, came across something sinister beyond the wall. The Night King is basically a supernatural superweapon that will kill anyone and everyone in its way, for some reason, making all of the political squabbling seem like an insignificant waste of time, distracting everyone from the real threat. Point is, his frosty army had been established as a big deal since the first scene of the first episode of the show, whilst for the most part remaining a mystery, like what are his motivations, or does he even have any motivations? The White Walkers are so far even more mysterious in the book, but I won't get into that, because by this point, when the Night King has broken past the 700-foot tall wall of ice that had been imprisoning him for thousands of years, the TV show had thoroughly diverged to follow a different canon of its own. Winterfell is a big castle, and the ancestral home of the human faction that could most accurately be considered the good guys everyone has been rooting for all series, along with Daenerys Targaryen, the lady who had spent season 2 through 6 using her dragons to gather an enormous army to reclaim the throne. In episode 3, that army gets put to excellent use standing in front of Winterfell. The cavalry are in front of the trebuchets are in front of the infantry, and the infantry are in front of a lackluster perimeter of spikes laid out around most of the castle walls. But the army is only defending the front wall that is facing the direction they expect the Night King to arrive from. From the very beginning, their strategy was as stupidly doomed to fail as could be, despite having all of the greatest remaining minds from the series gathered around one table to come up with it. The majority of Dany's army she has spent the whole series building up are wiped out in the first moments of the battle as a direct result of their awful strategy. With her Dothraki cavalry out in front, it seems they were intending to send them charging into the pitch black abyss towards an enemy they can't even see, without the weaponry it has been established is required to slay the army of the dead, who I will now refer to as zombies. Valyrian steel forged in dragonfire, dragon glass, or fire itself are the requirements, and thankfully the Red Priestess known as Melisandre arrives literally out of nowhere from the direction the zombies will supposedly be arriving to light all of the Dothraki's weapons on fire, but it is still futile. The zombie force made up of what should be brittle bones and decomposing flesh that are anywhere from months old to thousands of years old are somehow able to obliterate this giant mass of horses running into them in less than a minute. It's hard to believe the good guys would underestimate the Night King's army so badly to use their armorless cavalry in this way, as though attempting to break a formation they couldn't see would be better than flanking after the battle had already begun, or even that these superstitious Dothraki would be happy about all of their weapons igniting and then remain willing to be used as pointless cannon fodder, throwing themselves into a magically reanimated meat grinder that serves only to feed the Night King a bunch more soldiers and give the viewer this superficially haunting visual of the lights going out in the darkness. And the battle doesn't stop being contrived from then on. If the zombies could obliterate a huge force of charging cavalry that quickly and then supposedly add that cavalry to their own ranks, they should be able to obliterate the infantry outside Winterfell in equal or less time. Anyone positioned outside the walls, which is the majority of the army, should have died before they could retreat inside, and those inside should have been overwhelmed within minutes by the zombies that somehow seem to be able to climb over each other like a tidal wave rather than just collapsing. Melisandre is required to light the trench because inflamed arrows are blown out and torchbearers die instantly, and the zombies stand awkwardly on the other side for a bit before remembering or receiving the order to smother the fire by walking forward and laying on top of it, creating a bridge for their zombie friends despite being highly flammable throughout the series up to this point. Like a video game and to the good guy's misfortune, it seems the devs just sneaked out a patch, massively nerfing how much damage one square of fire can inflict. The rest of Winterfell's defenses are entirely lacking or otherwise deemed futile in the face of the zombies now closing in on them in groups conveniently proportional to how many each major character can survive being surrounded by at one time. The longer this repetitive battle of barely choreographed sword swinging goes on, the larger that amount seems to be, until the entire castle is just covered in zombies, with the characters scattered around like a underlit Where's Waldo picture. The contrast between the characters' invincibility and stupidity didn't spell well for the drama that was still left to unfold in the last 3 episodes of the series, with perhaps the worst contrivance occurring in the Winterfell crypt, where they chose to hide everyone unable to help defend the castle, except for Samwell Tarly for some reason, and where the Night King's dead rising powers can of course reach, summoning the decrepit remains of Stark ancestors to burst through these stone coffins imprisoning them and then fail to kill anyone important cowering down there, because their survival is oh so important for the rest of the season's plot to unfold. In the previous season, a zombie remained trapped for weeks whilst being transported in a wooden crate, and the rest of the zombies covering Winterfell aren't punching holes through people's torsos or tearing their limbs off. All of this is obscured by the controversial stylistic approach they took with the cinematography and colour grading, ignoring any sense of visual clarity that would help determine where characters are or if they're currently being killed, by making the whole episode as dark as a blizzard rolling in at night might realistically be.
We had 11 weeks of night shooting, so that was quite a feat for any crew to go through.
We knew this episode was going to be almost entirely battle. It's well over an hour and it's mostly action, and part of what we cared about a lot here was getting Miguel on board and forcing him to shoot 55 straight nights.
Look at it this way, I never ever want to do that again. I don't think anybody who did that ever wants to do it again. Yeah, that was tough, and I don't think it was something that anybody really realised just how hard it was going to be.
The long night. When I was doing it, it was -14. Just chilling, -14.
Realism and the intended effect of creating a confusing, chaotic atmosphere to add to the hopelessness notwithstanding, this darkness was for many viewers less forgivable than any storytelling contrivances could ever be. It's hard to appreciate the arduously long production of back-to-back night shoots, or to buy into the suspense, no matter how contrived it blatantly is, when you're straining your eyes to see what the hell is even going on. Watching the episode with a clean screen with the curtains closed is one thing, but with the streaming compression that commonly ruins such darkness, or with people having their TVs calibrated to different settings, the visual problems were an egregious and frankly pretentious oversight. Whilst the characters on the ground in Winterfell are screaming and crying, Jon and Dany are flying around making inefficient use of their dragons, such as being blown away by the blizzard, and Jon failing to use dragonfire to light the trench despite being right next to it when Melisandre slowly takes it upon herself. They can eliminate huge swathes of zombies whilst flying over the battlefield, far more than any infantry or cavalry could, and something they should have been doing every moment they knew the undead army's location, except they are too cautious of two contrived weapons the Night King has at his disposal. Some kind of ice javelin that he can throw at an Olympic level but never has more than a couple of, and the zombie dragon he acquired in the previous season with one of those javelins. A dragon Dany was warned not to put at risk in her desire to rescue Jon and his party on their stupid quest to capture a zombie, and a dragon which, when turned over to the Night King's forces, allowed him to pass the wall. How very convenient for him. Equally convenient is that Jon and Dany are unable to eliminate him or any of his White Walker generals, despite them all being vulnerable at various stages of the battle. It would be really handy if they could eliminate any of them, because it has been established their demise causes the collapse of an arbitrary number of zombies, and if they manage to eliminate the Night King, who makes himself the most vulnerable of them all, then the entire army collapses.
The Night King made them all. They follow his command. If he falls, getting to him may be our best chance.
If that's true, he'll never expose himself.
Yes, he will. He'll come for me. He's tried before, many times with many three-eyed ravens.
Why?
Jon and Dany fight him and his zombie dragon in the skies a bit, which he could theoretically have used in a brief flyover to destroy all of Winterfell and everyone inside before they had a chance to react. He ends up falling to the ground and casually makes his way towards his target in the Godswood, Bran. We are given no explanation for why the Night King is immune to dragonfire when he remains susceptible to dragonglass and Valyrian steel, or why he smugly expected that to be the case. Nonetheless, after already dodging the Night King's javelin, Dany decides to fly away instead of using her dragon to squash him or eat him or pick him up and drop him into the ocean. Jon ends up on the ground and runs towards the Night King because Dany doesn't pick him up on her dragon. The Night King aura farms some more by raising a bunch of zombies all around Jon that would surely kill him, and when Dany does decide to land, she lets a bunch of zombies climb all over her and falls helplessly onto the ground as well. Luckily, Jorah Mormont, who has been her bodyguard and most devoted follower since the beginning of the series, arrives out of nowhere to save her and then dies, making him the second highest profile death in the episode after having long reached a point in his character development that it was inevitable. The highest profile death is Theon, who is one of the archers awkwardly defending Bran in the Godswood. The Night King and Bran are the two most important members of each side, and yet they are left the most exposed, with the Night King and all of his generals gathering in one place rather than taking part in the battle themselves or just not entering line of sight sight at all, and Bran rolling his magic eyes into the back of his head to no benefit the audience is given any awareness of.
Just when you think that it's all over, and just when you think that Jon Snow's gonna be the hero again, we realise that Arya peers through the mist.
Arya is one of the most fan favourite characters who has, like pretty much everyone else, been let down in the second half of the series. She's superficially cool because she spent much of that time as this kind of lone wolf assassin in training. So after returning home to Winterfell, expectations were high that she would put her skills to good use. That she is now one of Westeros's best fighters isn't entirely believable, but people could for the most part let it slide because it's Arya and she's the simplest underdog character to root for. But not in the long night. She starts off battling atop the castle walls, taking on several zombies at once. Then she moves into a baffling stealth mission in the library, where blue moonlight shines in from the orange fires outside. If she were so capable in a more dangerous situation moments earlier, why is she now so afraid of being found by a few zombies waddling around in what should be much darker darkness? And how did they find themselves peacefully roaming any other part of the castle anyway? Did they fall out of the Night King's control and go in automatic search for food? How is the library even so quiet when thousands of bodies are smashing together outside?
The library sequence was built around the idea of I need to have a marked shift where the audience, instead of coming back and going, okay, and more battle, they come back and they go, oh, change the style. Hopefully what it does is it refreshes the audience and they're like, you know, we want to know what's going on outside, but we're okay to be inside for a minute and slow things down. And we're also okay to be with Arya, who's suddenly, from being this incredibly confident character that she's been now for quite some time, is completely traumatized by what's happened to her.
Arya's assassin skills aren't enough to stop her being discovered by the zombies' exceptional hearing. She rushes away in fear, having to be saved by Beric Dondarrion, the resurrecting guy who decides to throw his fiery sword, holds back a few zombies at the end of a hallway, somehow manages to catch up to Arya and the Hound down that hallway, and then doesn't get resurrected despite them entering a room containing one of the only people in the world with the ability to resurrect him. Melisandre has serendipitously found herself in this random room for a different God-given purpose, to help Arya realize her mission of killing the Night King, as if the blue eyes of the White Walkers was what that prophecy had most importantly been referring to this whole time.
Brown eyes, green eyes, and blue eyes.
Brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes.
D&D did a terrible job at establishing a narrative connection between Arya and the Night King that might have helped the audience accept her killing him being the outcome instead of Jon killing him, since Jon has been dedicated to the White Walkers the whole series. They're not incorrect for thinking that would have been the expected, predictable conclusion for one of the most speculated plotlines of the show, with their reasoning for Arya taking on the role instead being that it wouldn't be expected, and it wasn't expected because it wouldn't make any sense with how they built up the story. It's just them obnoxiously huffing their own expectations subverting farts.
We hope to kind of avoid the expected, and Jon Snow has always been the hero, the one who's been the savior, but it just didn't seem right to us for this moment.
The contrived manner in which it happens doesn't help either. After receiving this hint, Arya jogs off screen, leaving Mel and the Hound standing awkwardly in the room. The Night King had just got done killing Theon and takes his sweet time preparing to kill Bran when Arya comes flying and shouting in from nowhere, ruining most of her surprise advantage after managing to sneak past a wall of White Walkers that are apparently less perceptive than the zombies she was avoiding during her earlier stealth mission. The Night King grabs her in midair and holds her there long enough for her to drop her dagger into her other hand and stab him. If he were really that vulnerable all along, they really should have just shot a few Valyrian steel or dragonglass tipped arrows at him. Jon is shouting at the zombie dragon when the entire undead army drops dead, saving him, every other character somehow still alive, and the rest of the world. The moment The Long Night ended in literally a single night, the series and the viewers' hope for a satisfactory ending to the fantasy or political halves of the show were dead. Nothing important or profound was revealed about the Night King or his White Walkers. He wasn't even a plot device to eliminate a bunch of characters past their due date, because barely anyone died. They had spent almost a decade repeating "Winter is coming." It was practically the tagline of the show, and viewers wanted to buy into the unstoppable terror the undead army might unleash on Westeros when let free. But it turns out winter was just a lost level mystery, stringing the audience along between seasons for answers the writers themselves didn't know and don't seem to have thought much about when it was necessary to provide any. Even following the catastrophe of season 7, it was plausible that the northern apocalypse would collide with the political power struggles concentrated in the south. But no, the Night King was a slightly spooky nuisance who overlapped with Cersei's plot only when Jon brought her a zombie for show and tell, and she refused to provide help they ended up doing fine without, regardless of how many strategic blunders they managed to make. The sheer amount of contrived nonsense in the Long Night's battle tactics alone feels like D&D were taking the piss and rage-baiting the audience. Add to that its narrative failures, and it's as if the episode is daring us to notice how little sense anything makes, or how little it reveals about mysteries that had been an iconic part of the lore for years before the adaptation was even greenlit. The Dothraki charging blindly into pitch-black nothingness purely so the episode can have a pretty shot of their lights going out is one of the most obvious examples. A spectacle-first decision that collapses the moment you think about it for more than half a second. The Long Night is the densest encapsulation of everything this series had been doing wrong for years. Designing the story for people half-watching in bars, cheering and gasping at hollow spectacle whilst their drunkenness does the writers the courtesy of forgetting to ask basic questions or notice blatant discrepancies. Rewatching those earlier seasons or recommending them to a friend now comes with the knowledge that many characters and plotlines won't live up to their potential. With Harry Potter rebooting 15 years after its comparatively successful film adaptations concluded, I wouldn't be surprised to see Game of Thrones follow a similar path, especially if George does ever manage to finish those books to provide a proper blueprint. HBO made him rich and famous, but they have also dwarfed his artistic presence and influence and trapped him in being defined by something that has become the go-to example of bad final seasons.